On today's episode of Locked On Wild, the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase is this weekend, plus Jake Middleton to Toronto. Who would the Wild get in return?
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Alex Micheletti joins us as we discuss the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase coming up this weekend. We'll take a look once again at the names that will be going for the Minnesota Wild, as well as some of the names to keep an eye on from Chicago and St. Louis. We'll also talk about a recent trade rumor that has Jake Middleton heading to the Toronto Maple Leafs. We'll talk about the return and whether or not it's something the Wild should pursue. My name is Seth Topal, credentialed Wild media member and host of Locked On Wild since 2021, joined, as mentioned, by Alex Micheletti. And Alex, in a few more weeks, we will have the possibility for Victory Micheletti Mondays again. Hockey season is getting close, and we'll talk about it here in a little bit. The kickoff to the season, the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase coming up this weekend. It's here. It's finally here. Preseason after the Prospect Showcase, and then before you know it, October 10th, season opener. Hockey is back.
Yes, the full sports abyss is finally come to a close. So we got Vikings. We're feeling good after a Vikings win, and so got hockey on the way, college hockey too, and this is the best time of the year to be a sports fan for sure. It
really is. Now, before we talk about the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase, I did want to talk, and it was actually Denny that tipped me off to this. It's a recent trade rumor suggesting Jake Middleton to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I've got the article up on MSN here from NHL Trade Talk. It says Jake Middleton to the Maple Leafs makes no sense for the Minnesota Wild. So here is the trade on both sides. So Jake Middleton goes to Toronto. The Wild in this trade rumor would get back young wing prospect Nick Robertson. They'd get back defenseman Timothy Liljegren and a 2027 fourth-round pick. The logic being for Toronto is that they just want to add another veteran defenseman to their ranks with Morgan Rielly, Chris Tanev, and Oliver Ekman-Larsson on the roster right now. They are essentially swapping Liljegren for Jake Middleton. Now, from a financial standpoint, this mostly works because Toronto has $1.2 million in cap space right now. The Wild have about $750K, but they would be shedding an additional 1.4 because Liljegren makes $3 million per year. So money-wise, it makes sense. Picks and prospects-wise, is this a move that makes sense for the Minnesota Wild?
Well, we know Nick's brother, don't we? We've been terrorized by Jason.
Might as well try to get at least part of the scoring in that family on the Minnesota Wild roster.
That would be nice. I think Middleton is a better player than Liljegren. That's what scares me. And Robertson still, it's kind of unknown. He hasn't fully proven it in Toronto. If he if he lives up to his potential, then they'll definitely would be. I think it'd still be a win for the Wild, just because they're still looking for scoring. He's a young player. He's kind of bogged down there in Toronto. It's kind of similar for the Wild, where he's just been prospects are kind of bogged down a little bit, but he would fill a role, I think, in that that second line where there's still a hole. Now I know people want Ogren to fill that instead of Marcus Johansson. It's tough. Like I said, I don't know. I've never really liked Liljegren's game.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of a toss up for me.
Here's the way I look at it is you're taking away, because Liljegren is 6 foot and he is he's 192, 6 foot 192. Jake Middleton is I think like 6'1" or 6'2", but he's 225.
Right.
And you are taking away from a spot. And I know speed and skill is predominantly what wins games. Like I'm not trying to suggest that it isn't, but you're taking away one of the few players that provides something that most of the Minnesota Wild team does not have, especially on defense. Like you go Brock Faber, Jonas Brodin, Jared Spurgeon. When Zeev Buium gets up here, he's a player, he's about 5'11", I think, or 6 foot. None of these guys have beef. And Middleton's defensive numbers, I actually was reminded of this when I was doing a season preview show for another Wild podcast. Brett Marshall was one of the other guests on it. Jake Middleton's defensive numbers without Jared Spurgeon were abysmally bad. And so like it's one thing to maybe try to find somebody that can, play a little bit better defense, but you're leaving then basically your entire decor completely unprotected without somebody who can push back, so to speak. And so I would maybe look at this a year from now, once Buium is already here and you've got that taken care of. Maybe you revisit this, but I would say for right now, I would probably lean towards no, because again, Middleton provides you was one of the 3 or 4 guys on this team that can actually move weight around. And if you take that away, that leaves you pretty exposed throughout the season with teams like Winnipeg, who has big physical defensemen. The Dallas Stars have big physical forwards. Like you move Middleton off this roster just for the sake of moving him, you're leaving yourself a pretty open target for the entirety of the regular season.
Yeah, all you have really is Bogosian. I think people forget about him. Yeah, but that's that'd be the only guy with some physicality. So yeah, that would make things tough. And the decor as a whole, we still there's so much unknown. When you think about it, because are they going to put Merrill in Iowa and try to bury that contract? What's Spurgeon going to look like? Because we have no idea. I mean, not only did he have 1 surgery, he had 2 surgeries. So, and to back and hip, it's just like, oh boy. And he got hurt in the preseason. So I hope they take it really easy on him in this preseason. I know he has to get reps, but he got hurt in preseason in a meaningless game. And that derailed, the season for the Wild, not having their captain.
Yes, it did. And in the vein of players coming back too quickly, let's keep in mind, and I know it's a different injury, but Joel Eriksson Ek, he worked his way back to try to get back in that series against Dallas. Everything was looking good until he got on the ice and he had to move in a direction that he wasn't anticipating, and that was it.
It gave away. His leg gave away.
Everything that you can plan for is fine, but there just is so much with moving around on the ice, blindside hits, players doing things that you can't plan for. There's so much gray area. And so Middleton, again, is another guy that if something were to happen to Jared Spurgeon, he can play like he showed last year. He's capable of eating up big chunks of minutes. So I would, at this point, I would lean against this trade. But again, maybe you look at it a year from now, or depending on how some of the other defensive prospects in Iowa do, maybe you look at it a year or two from now. But let's also keep in mind Zach Bogosian is signed for this year and next, and it's highly likely that if the Wild are out of it at the trade deadline, that he probably gets moved this year. So that's another big body that is potentially out the window too.
Well, another wrinkle on this too that I that we found out that after all the talk the past couple months is Patrik Laine turning down the deal to the Wild. Now, I mean, does that red flag all these other agents and teams? I know Laine had that can be waived, and so it's that just throws a whole nother wrinkle into things because a prominent player like Patrik Laine, I know he hasn't shown it the past couple seasons, but for him to say no to the Wild, does that give red flags to other agents and teams that are maybe trying to move prominent players and up and coming players? That's gonna be fascinating. And I keep letting you know about these goalies, the goalie situation in Vancouver. I mean, I sent you something over this past weekend that said that Thatcher Demko, he's going to have to just deal with his knee condition the rest of his career. And when you see that, that's never good. I mean, he's not an old goalie either.
No.
So they have both of their goalies with knee problems, and so that's a team to keep an eye on for with Gustafsson and what the Wild are going to do with their goaltending situation. And it's just gonna be it's gonna be fascinating because you got height and that what they're going to do with that. So there's still a lot that Bill Guerin has to figure out here.
His phone's probably going to be pretty busy during the preseason. So we'll see. We'll keep an eye on this trade. Let us know in the comments. Would you do the proposed Jake Middleton for Timothy Liljegren, Nicholas Robertson, and a 2027 fourth round pick? Would you pull the trigger on that trade? Let us know in the comments. We're going to take a look at the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase coming up this weekend. The Minnesota Wild are involved, but a couple of other teams are in the mix as well. We'll take a look at who and which notable players are attending. That's all on the way as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, you've heard us talk about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we've got something a little different for you today. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com, download America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. For your second listen today, make sure to check out Locked On NHL, recapping some of the big stories over the weekend in the NHL, one of which we'll talk about here to finish off the show today. But Alex, just taking a look, the Tom Kurvers Prospect Showcase, which will be going on this weekend, featuring the St. Louis Blues, Chicago Blackhawks, and the Minnesota Wild. The game schedule is on Friday, Blues against Blackhawks at 7. On Saturday, Blackhawks against Wild at 6. And on Sunday, Blues versus Wild at 3 p.m. Players included, let's go to the Minnesota Wild roster first. Luke Toporowski, Hunter Height, Matthew Sopp, Ryder Ritchie, Gavin Hain, Mason Zabeski, Riley Height, Mikey Milne, Cody Dupuis, Felix Lacerte, Caden Bankier, Brad Merrick, Jack O'Brien, Pavel Novak, and Luke Lohheit. On defense, Jack Peart, Bogdan's Hodis, Jordan Torney, Carson Lambos, Kyle Masters, Stevie Leskovar, David Spacek, Kalen Parker, and the goalies, Kyle McClellan, Samuel Levi, Riley Mercer, and Chase Wutsky. Which of those players are you most intrigued to see in this weekend's competition?
Ryder Ritchie. I know he was banged up last year, but that kid has all the skill in the world, and so I think that was a great pick by Judd Brackett. We'll see. Now he's full go, full health. Jack Peart, who I've mentioned in previous episodes, coming off a strong college career at St. Cloud, and he's ready to transition to the pro game here. And then Carson Lambos, I think the seat is hot for him because he's a first round pick, and now they've added some other defensemen to to the group here, and Iowa as a whole had a tough season, so this is a big year for him, because they've added Zeev Boyum to the D prospects core, and he might be slipping a little bit here. So Lambos has a lot to prove this upcoming season, in my opinion.
I think if we grade this out, I think from a prospect perspective, the Wild have the biggest, the highest level of prospects of the three teams. You're right on. I'm a huge fan of Jack Peart, so I'm really excited to see him develop over the course of this season. I'm intrigued by Chase Wutsky in the goalie room because he's a super young kid, but he has been billed as a pretty quick riser amongst the group. Cody Dupuis, another name to keep an eye on. Obviously, Riley Height. Riley Height is the one that I think, if he ends up being really top end, as is expected, that's really going to take this Minnesota Wild team to a different level. Looking at the other two, the St. Louis Blues, they win the name portion of the of this prospect pool with names such as Alex Santeri, Kazamaki. In addition to that, they've got Dalibor Dvorsky, just some real elite names out of this mix. And so they win the name portion, but I think the Minnesota Wild still handle things from a prospect perspective. On the Blackhawks side, Frankie Nazar is a name to keep in mind and to keep an eye on here this weekend. Obviously, you've got Artem Levshinov, the recent draft pick for Chicago, so they've got some good names as well. But literally, St. Louis literally wins the name portion of this.
Yeah, Nazar was incredible at Michigan, and same Leshinov, Michigan State. So Chicago, they are adding some big time prospects from the college ranks. They're starting to add some talent around Connor Bedard. So it's gonna be scary. Chicago's gonna be very good again here soon. So that. But that makes things fun. The Wild Blackhawks rivalry is a ton of fun. The Wild have beaten up on Chicago more recently, which is great. But hopefully the Wild can, if the Blackhawks do get into the playoff mix, that the Wild can return the favor to the Blackhawks after all those years.
Yeah, it's at some point they're going to have to, like, the course correction is going to have to happen where the Minnesota Wilds beat the Chicago Blackhawks like 6 straight postseasons or something like that with Jesper
Stanchion and
we don't talk about that here. It'll be fun, and I'm putting some plans in motion for a recap show with both Locked On Blackhawks and Locked On Blues to get a little better sense of how the weekend is rolling out, because for me, it is my birthday on Saturday, so I'll be enjoying that this weekend. But we'll definitely have a recap of the Prospect Showcase for you early on next week. So stay tuned for that. Should be a good time, and as we talked about at the start of the show, it is really the kickoff to training camp and the preseason and getting things rolling for the regular season, which will be here before we know it. Just going to finish with a couple of notes here today. Obviously, a name that has had some pretty good success at the NHL level is getting enshrined into the Hockey Hall of Fame. So we'll talk about that, as well as PWHL Minnesota unveiling their name. We'll set the precursor for a full PWHL show coming up for you tomorrow. That's all coming up as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wilds after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. We are your team each and every day. And as I mentioned, we'll be having 2 episodes for you tomorrow, as Alexis Pearson will join us to talk about PWHL Minnesota. We'll talk about the new name, the new GM, and we'll get you set for the start of the season. So make sure to join in for that tomorrow afternoon. Should be a great time. Also, for those that were looking for the live show yesterday, Denny unfortunately not feeling well enough to do the live show last night. We are going to reschedule it to either tomorrow or Wednesday. So we'll keep you posted as to when that will be rescheduled. But Alex, let's talk about Mr. Matt Cullen, one of us, Minnesota's own, who is being enshrined into the Hockey Hall of Fame. A 21-year NHL career, which included stops with the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim, Carolina, Minnesota, Pittsburgh, Florida, Nashville, New York Rangers, and Ottawa, all in a span of 1997 to 2019. And for Cullen, he did a little bit of everything. He was more of a kind of middle of the lineup to bottom of the lineup guy, but played good defense, won a ton of faceoffs, just experienced a lot. And like I said, Virginia, Minnesota, and a St. Cloud State Husky alum, go Huskies, woo. He's very deserving of it, and another case of somebody just finding a way to stay at the NHL level for an incredible amount of time.
Yeah, just a legend, a legend of the game. He did things the right way, and he stayed in phenomenal shape to last that long. It's incredible when you read that off. How long of a hockey journey that he had. Cup winner, and so he did it all. There's nothing that he didn't accomplish, and now he's got a highly touted son, coming up the ranks too, that will be a college hockey, player and hopefully NHL. So that's cool that he gets to, help his son try to get to levels that he did. I'm excited to see him go in there. So well deserved. It's always cool to see an Iron Range kid, make it all the way to glory.
And he won over 50% in the faceoff circle in his sleep. He just did that every year, and had a couple different tenures with the Minnesota Wild, in which his first tenure with them between 2010 to 2013, at the ripe old age of 34, 35, and 36. His worst face-off percentage those years was 53.2%. And then in 2017, 2018, had another go-around with the Wild, and he was at 50.4% there. At that point, he was at pretty much a fourth line role, playing about 12 minutes per night. But I remember him being brought in at that point, in kind of looking back, being brought in to bring a little pedigree to the team. And so you talk about a guy that won the Stanley Cup, was just known as kind of a pro's pro. Like he went about everything the right way. And the Wild obviously were looking for him to impart some of that knowledge on their young prospects in the twilight of his career.
Yeah, it was a home run removed, and I'm sure he enjoyed having family close to watch him play, and just really cool. You think of this franchise, and they've done it numerous times, bringing Ryan Carter home, and so it's fun when they can get some local Minnesota products to make it. And heck, look at Brock Faber. Everybody loves when a home home area kid can rise the ranks, and then also they can sign free agents that have the Minnesota connections for sure.
Yes, 100%. All right, so the big news today, and that was one of the reasons that that today's show is coming out a little later, was there was a rumored name for PWHL Minnesota, but that did not end up being the choice. And so we now know officially that PWHL Minnesota is called, drumroll please, the Minnesota Frost. That is your name of PWHL Minnesota. The logo was unveiled earlier today, as well as the the type. They're keeping the purple, which I dig. Minnesota Frost. Alex, what are your initial reactions?
Yeah, I'm so glad that they didn't go with Superior, which was the rumor. That made no sense. People were telling me, this reminds them of Wisconsin, and so Frost. Yeah, out of the other names that I saw, I was like, I'm glad it wasn't poor. One of the teams is Charge. That just made no sense. The Toronto one, I can't even pronounce. I don't know what
the
what it
Scepters.
Even is. Yeah, what is that?
It's a staff. Like back in the like old England days.
Okay.
The kings and queens would hold these like staffs.
What does that have to do with Toronto? That's
I don't know.
That's some of these some of them are like what so I get the Frost because of the Minnesota connection there, and like you said, I'm glad they kept the purple because purple is
it's pretty synonymous with Minnesota. Prince, obviously, the Vikings. PWHL Minnesota.
Everything, yeah. So
evidently the 4 finalists, courtesy of Bauer Hockey, placeholders for PWHL apparel. This was tweeted out earlier today. Evidently the finalists were Minnesota Superior, Minnesota Frost, Minnesota Monarchs, and Minnesota Marmots.
I'm glad it's not Marmots.
Yeah, because first question is, what on earth is a marmot?
It's got to be like a gopher, right?
I am looking right now. Now it's a clothing apparel company for one, but marmots are large ground squirrels in the genus Marmota, with 15 species living in Asia, Europe, and North America. These herbivores are active during the summer, when they can often be found in groups, but are not seen during the winter when they hibernate underground. They are the heaviest members of the squirrel family. Okay, so I've
never seen one in my life.
I have definitely seen some of these because I've seen, just I like to drive a lot. Just go for a drive, kind of crank some tunes. And so one of the things that I've been doing this summer while not working full time is I've driven to a few of the state parks here in Minnesota just to kind of explore. I've definitely seen these like on the side of the road, and you're like, that's a little too big to be a squirrel. So is it like a woodchuck? Is it a beaver? What's it? So I've definitely seen these.
Okay.
So I guess there is the Minnesota tie there, but at the same time,
that doesn't roll off the tongue well for merchandise. I don't know.
A number of historians and paleontologists have postulated that a particular variant of the marmot caused Black Death in the 14th century.
Oh God.
Okay.
Yeah, that seems like you're cursing a franchise.
This is that doesn't seem ominous at all. So thankfully that was not the pick. I'm gonna say right now, if we don't get the super cartoony version of Jack Frost as the mascot, I'm going to riot. It just fits too perfectly.
Yes, I'm with you. I'm with you. You had some funny gifs today on X, so that was good humor for sure.
I'm going to use them all season. Like it's just going to be Mr. Freeze from Batman and Robin gifs every game. You're not sending me to the cooler. Every game. So
it'll be good.
I'm excited. As we've talked about, Alexis will be helping us out with PWHL coverage all season. So we will check in with her to get more intel on PWHL Minnesota's new GM, as well as the new name coming up tomorrow. So that is our show for today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in as you do each and every day of the week. Make sure to hit that like button before you head out for the day so you don't miss out on any new episodes of Locked On Wild, especially with the season right around the corner. We are going to be cranking things up here as we get closer, and then it's full systems go once the season gets started. So make sure to not miss out on any of it and subscribe today. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.